Welcome to our webinar, Frontline Settlement Workers Training on WorkBC Employment Services. The purpose of today's webinar is to share information about the new WorkBC program and to introduce a new AMSA e-learning workshop on WorkBC. The workshop is in the form of an e-learning module. It was developed for settlement practitioners who provide frontline services to newcomers. It'll be very helpful for all settlement workers, including those working with BCSIS clients who have temporary status. In addition to giving you a top-line view of the e-learning module and some highlights of the content, we're fortunate to have a guest speaker with us today to provide practical basic knowledge of the WorkBC program. Christy McGee, Senior Advisor at the Ministry of Social Development and Poverty Reduction, will share her expertise. Our goal today is to inform you about the e-learning module content and how it can support service delivery. We encourage all settlement staff to take the e-learning workshop. We're confident it'll be a helpful professional development tool. The e-learning module will be posted on AMSA's learning management system at the end of September. It can be taken individually or as a group. It's an accessible, cost-effective training tool to use individually for experienced or new staff and at staff meetings. We will email all webinar participants a link for registration as soon as production is completed. And the great news is there's no cost or fee to take the e-learning module. Later in this webinar, we'll share an overview of the workshop structure and content. The webinar today is delivered by AMSA. AMSA is BC's province-wide umbrella association with over 70 member organizations who build culturally inclusive communities. First established in 1977, AMSA provides opportunities for its members and others in the settlement and integration community to exchange knowledge, build connections, and engage with a unified voice. With a BC-wide perspective, AMSA works to address emerging issues and build capacity for the BC settlement sector. Within the sector, AMSA was an early adopter of technology as an accessible, cost-effective, wide-reaching method to engage members and share information. Today's webinar is an example, and so is the e-learning module we are introducing. Please visit our website, amsa.org, for Migration Matters info sheets, resources, quick links, webinars, e-learning modules, and recent publications. My name is Lori Cameron, and I'm the AMSA Provincial Integration Program Manager. I work on sector support projects for BC Settlement and Integration Services Program, or BCSIS, which is funded by the BC Provincial Ministry of Jobs, Trade and Technology, and I'll be guiding today's webinar. Our guest speaker is an expert on the WorkBC program. Christy McGee is a Senior Advisor at the Ministry of Social Development and Poverty Reduction and is responsible for developing WorkBC employment policy for underrepresented groups, including immigrants and refugees. Thank you, Christy, for joining us today. We're speaking to you from the AMSA offices in Burnaby. Alice Podell, AMSA Program Coordinator, is helping us technically and with questions. We have Con Eraslin, AMSA's Multimedia Specialist, handling the technical side of the webinar. Melissa J., AMSA Communications Manager, is close at hand to help make sure everything goes smoothly. We have a large group participating in the webinar today from all across the province. We appreciate your being with us. It tells us how important professional development is to you and to your organization. It also tells us that there's a high level of interest in the WorkBC program. We gratefully acknowledge the financial support of the province of BC through the Ministry of Jobs, Trade and Technology for this webinar, as well as for the e-learning module it introduces. And of course, we gratefully acknowledge subject matter expertise provided by the province of BC through the Ministry of Social Development and Poverty Reduction. During the webinar, we will ask you questions through the polling feature. When you see a slide that looks like this one, it shows that we would like your response to a question. Please respond because it's interactive, it's fun, and it provides helpful information from our participants. In fact, let's do the first poll now. Tell us about your role within your organization. Please click on the response that most closely reflects your position. Do you work in senior management, middle management, or a supervisory position? Are you frontline staff, or would you define yourself as other? Please go ahead and click on the responses now. So it looks like almost everybody is in the category of frontline staff. That's a really high proportion. Right now it's 83% are frontline staff. Fantastic. All right, great. Thank you everybody for responding to that poll. We've got a second poll question for you now. Please tell us if you're viewing today's webinar on your own or in a group. Please go ahead and enter your responses now and click on the size of the group. And again, it looks like the vast majority are on your own. We have about 85% of the participants are watching on their own, although we have 6% in a group of 4 or more. That's really interesting. Well, thank you everybody for responding to that poll. So why are employment services important? Well, according to the British Columbia Labour Market Report 2018 edition, BC is experiencing strong economic and employment growth. People in BC can look forward to positive growth over the next 10 years. Full and part-time employment is expected to grow at an average of 1.1% per year. This confirms a growing demand for workers. In fact, it's predicted that there will be over 900,000 job openings between now and 2028. That's a lot of jobs to fill with the right workers. British Columbia's workforce is evolving. About 615,000 workers will permanently leave the workforce over the next 10 years, mainly due to retirements. Many will be replaced by young workers entering the labor force. Approximately 27% will be replaced by immigrants. It's notable that Indigenous communities are the fastest growing demographic in BC and a significant factor in employment outlook. It's essential that this economic and employment growth includes everyone and that nobody is excluded or left behind. WorkBC supports all British Columbians to be successful in BC's economy. While more people have joined the labor force, there are challenges with finding enough qualified workers in certain occupations and regions. The new WorkBC program is an essential support for economic and employment growth. The program helps all British Columbians on their path to employment by leveraging strengths and overcoming challenges that create barriers to sustainable and meaningful employment. So this leads us into the first section of the webinar, which is the WorkBC Employment Services Program. This includes an introduction to WorkBC, program background and evolution, services, and eligibility. And before we get to that, we'll just do one more quick poll right now. Please get ready to respond. Tell us about the services you deliver. We're interested in knowing if you're a WorkBC service provider, BC Settlement and Integration Services, or other service providers under settlement or employment, or are you a language training provider? Please go ahead and enter your responses now and click on the type of services that align most closely with your work. So it looks like the highest proportion of participants today are BC Settlement and Integration Services providers, which is great. And then we have 37% other settlement services. So that's exactly who we were hoping for in today's audience. Thank you for your response to the poll. So at this point, I will ask Christy McGee to take over. As I mentioned before, Christy is a senior advisor at the Ministry of Social Development and Poverty Reduction. She's responsible for developing WorkBC employment policy for underrepresented groups, including immigrants and refugees. Christy's a graduate of McGill University and has international experience developing public policy related to the environment, education, health, and employment. Christy will guide you through this section of the workshop.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Lori, for the lovely introduction. So I'll start by giving a bit of a brief overview of WorkBC. WorkBC, formerly the Employment Program of BC, or EPBC, has been the province's main employment program since its launch in 2012. It's designed to help British Columbians prepare for, find, and maintain employment. So you may know that in April, we transitioned to a new program, WorkBC Employment Services, with new contracts, policy enhancements, a new financial model, and a new approach to service delivery and contract management. In addition to WorkBC Employment Services, we have two other contracts. WorkBC Assistive Technology Services, to help people with disabilities stay employed with employment-related disability supports, and WorkBC Apprentice Services, provision of financial supports to individuals doing an apprenticeship. You may have also heard of Community and Employer Partnerships, or CEP, which are community-based initiatives to address local labor market issues. And as before, we will continue to develop policy and carry out stakeholder engagement on priority groups. So we've made some key changes and hopefully added benefits to the new WorkBC program. First, we're putting people first. We've put into place a number of changes to improve access and supports for British Columbians. This includes increasing the number of WorkBC centres, putting improved technology into place, and making some policy changes to provide our clients with better services and supports. Enabling performance. We've introduced a program model that focuses on getting and sustaining employment by streamlining the model, creating policy flexibility, and an enhanced support on supporting clients on their first year of employment. Renewing relationships. With a renewed program, we see an opportunity for renewed relationships with our contractors across the ministry and with other ministries, such as the Ministry of Jobs, Trade and Technology. And finally, leveraging the WorkBC brand. With the program refresh, one of the big changes has been a shift to align more fully under the WorkBC brand. So you may have known that previously we were EPBC delivered by WorkBC centres, and now we are WorkBC delivered by WorkBC centres. So I'm going to start by touching on the self-serve stream available through WorkBC. We sometimes refer to this as light touch services. And the reason why I'm starting here is because anybody can use WorkBC Self-Serve, even if they don't meet basic eligibility. So refugee claimants without permanent residence yet, international students, people with temporary work permit holders, those people typically would not be eligible for WorkBC case management, but they are eligible for WorkBC Self-Serve. So self-serve clients can use the computers and the printers in the center. They can check out the job board and carry out other independent job search activities. This may be particularly helpful for refugee claimants or temporary work permit holders who have applied for permanent residence and would like to get a jump start on their job search while they're waiting for permanent residence to be granted. And basically all the other services that I'll be talking about during this presentation fall under case management. Okay, so who is eligible for WorkBC Employment Services case management? All unemployed and or precariously employed British Columbians who are legally eligible to work. And what do we mean by precariously employed? It could be individuals in unstable employment, which could be either irregular hours or pay, who cannot support themselves and or their family. Individuals whose jobs will be replaced by technology soon, individuals who are working well below their skills or qualifications, and individuals who would have just cause for leaving their employment, such as harassment or discrimination. So as of last year, these individuals, these precariously employed individuals, are now eligible for WorkBC case management. So I thought, given our audience, it would be helpful to go through some examples of WorkBC eligibility for case management, but also, of course, for every rule, there is typically an exception. So typically, individuals with a 900 series SIN, social insurance number, would not be eligible for case management, but the exception is those who have been granted permanent residence, but are in sort of a limbo status, so they have not yet received their new social insurance number. Typically, individuals with a temporary work permit not eligible for WorkBC case management, but the exception would be those who have no conditions on their work permit, for example, the type of work, the employer they can work for, where they can work, or for how long they can work. And again, they have permanent residence granted. and refugee claimants. So typically, refugee claimants who have not yet been seen by the Immigration and Refugee Board would not be eligible for WorkBC case management. But if they have been seen by the Immigration and Refugee Board and they've been approved, they've been determined as a convention refugee or protected person, then yes, we would allow that person into case management. So typically, if an individual is working more than 20 hours a week, that does not meet our definition of unemployed, so they would not be eligible for case management. However, individuals with a disability who are working more than 20 hours a week, but they want to achieve a higher level of self-sufficiency, they are eligible. And as I mentioned on the previous slide, if you fit into any of those descriptions of precariously employed and you may be working more than 20 hours a week, then yes, you would be eligible for case management. Typically, full-time students do not meet the definition of unemployed. But the exception would be if you are a student with a disability in your last year of school, and that can be secondary or post-secondary. And also youth in and from care in their last year of school, again, secondary or post-secondary, they are eligible for case management if they want to get a jump start as they transition into the labor force. And finally, individuals receiving maternity, parental, sickness, or compassionate care leave through employment insurance, we typically wouldn't think of them as being unemployed because they may have been employed when they started to receive those benefits. However, the exception to those situations is individuals who were already unemployed or when they began those benefits or do not have employment to return to. So we would assist those clients with case management. So I'll touch briefly on the types of clients we have. I think sometimes there may be a misconception that WorkBC only serves clients in receipt of financial assistance either from the provincial or federal government, but WorkBC is actually for everybody. So as you can see, the majority are BCEA or EI clients, but that may be because we have mechanisms in place to refer those clients directly to WorkBC. General clients, which is those who are not receiving income assistance, disability assistance, or they're not EI clients, they tend to find out about WorkBC through other avenues, perhaps word of mouth, or they walk in off the street. And sometimes it's on the recommendation of another service provider if that other service is just not quite the right fit for that individual. And you'll see on the slide that I've put an asterisk beside employment insurance. We've actually expanded our definition of what it is to be an EI client, and I'll touch on that a little bit later. So the area that I work in, diversity and client inclusion, pays attention to the needs and outcomes of individuals attaching to these client inclusion groups. So approximately 70% of the entire WorkBC population is individuals who self-identify as attaching to at least one of these groups. And I think the definitions for these groups may be somewhat straightforward. One that maybe isn't immediately obvious is multi-barriered. Multi-barriered individuals are those who face chronic mental health, addiction, or homelessness issues, and clients are considered multi-barriered if they're facing two or more of those challenges. So as you can see, our definition of immigrant is quite broad, and sometimes it's broader than how other employment programs in BC define it. So it's an individual not born in Canada who immigrated from another country to settle in Canada and is legally eligible to work in British Columbia. So we don't have any restrictions on the amount of time that they had to have been living in BC, either a minimum or a maximum. Okay, so now on to what WorkBC case management entails. The majority of clients do go into case management, which is one-on-one support from an employment counselor. And once accepted into case management, there are many different services and supports available. So we've got job search assistance and job carving, work experience, help with self-employment, various kinds of skills training, on-the-job support once in employment, lots of different kinds of assessments to help understand your particular barriers and strengths related to employment, disability supports related to employment for people who need them, and different kinds of financial supports as well. So I'll touch on services available to all clients, or what we sometimes call general clients. It all begins with a client needs assessment, which is a holistic assessment of the client's employment-related strengths and barriers. After the CNA is completed, clients can participate in any or all of these services depending on client need. All clients are also eligible for employment readiness workshops, which feature a number of different topics like interview skills, career planning, and resume writing. There are also more in-depth topics like workplace assertiveness, effective workplace behavior, and problem solving in the workplace. All clients are also eligible for basic certification courses such as food safe and basic computer training. Employment counselors can help clients create a job search plan and help market them to employers. We can also help clients if they need financial supports to start a job. Clients may require specialized assessments to inform employability. Many are related to assessing disability, but there are two which might be relevant to immigrants, specifically the prior learning assessment and foreign credentialing. And for clients with complex employment needs, contractors can deliver customized employment, which is a job carving service tailored to the client's needs. And we don't define complex employment needs. That sometimes is related to individuals with disabilities, but there might be other scenarios, and it's really up to the professional judgment of the contractor to decide what we mean by complex employment needs. All clients are also eligible for job sustainment services, which is on-the-job support to help clients keep their job or volunteering position. We have a number of financial supports like bus passes and childcare to help people find and keep a job. Individuals who require language interpretation can receive up to 12 sessions. And we also offer clinical counseling available to survivors of violence or abuse, which may be a useful service to some refugees if they identify as having experienced trauma. And this is available up to 10 sessions. So as I mentioned before, we've expanded our definition of EI client. Those first two items are basically the same as they've ever been. Either the individual is currently on an active employment insurance claim, or they've received EI benefits sometime in the past. The new criteria will also include individuals who have paid into EI in at least 5 of the last 10 years. So this actually means that we're counting many more people as being EI clients. They don't need to have actually received the benefits. So with this new expanded EI eligibility, more British Columbians are now eligible to take part in these services. Some of your clients who are naturalized citizens and have been living and working in Canada for some time may be able to participate in these services. And as I've indicated on the left, they would of course be eligible for all the services that general clients are eligible for, as well as the services on the right. So I'll give a brief summary of them. The wage subsidy work experience obviously is for clients who are lacking work experience, and that can be done up to a maximum of 24 weeks. Occupational skills training, which leads to a certificate, diploma, or degree, can be done up to a maximum of 3 years. Self-employment services is when you receive help from your employment counselor to develop or implement a business plan, and that's up to a maximum of 1 year. Job creation partnerships is a part of the STEP initiative that I mentioned at the beginning of the slides, the community and employer partnerships. That's a mixture of work experience and skills enhancement for a maximum of 1 year. And finally, project-based labor market training, or PBLMT, is another kind of STEP stream, and that's a mixture of classroom instruction and work experience for a maximum of 1 year. And I'd also like to take a moment to touch on services available to clients receiving income assistance. In some cases, individuals who are refugee claimants or temporary work permit holders may be able to apply for income assistance through the provincial government. While their case for permanent residence is still pending, they are not eligible for case management through WorkBC Employment Services, only self-serve, which I mentioned earlier. However, once they have proof of permanent residence, they become eligible for case management in WorkBC. And if they manage to keep their income assistance case open, they may be eligible for these additional services. So as I mentioned before, of course, they would have all the services on the left-hand side, which are for all clients or general clients. And in addition, they would have these services on the right. An unpaid work experience. Those are for clients lacking work experience. Typically, those are a maximum of 8 weeks, but in exceptional circumstances for income assistance or disability clients with either the PWD status, that's person with a disability, or PPMB status, that's persons with persistent multiple barriers. We love our acronyms at the ministry. That can be done up to 12 weeks for the unpaid work experience. And they would also be eligible, again, as EI clients. IA clients are eligible for occupational skills training, which leads to a certificate, diploma, or degree. That's up to a maximum of 3 years. And as with the other group, self-employment services with help to develop and implement a business plan for a maximum of 1 year. There are cases when clients are eligible for both BCSIS and WorkBC employment services. And in those cases, employment counselors should work with the client to determine which service is the best fit for the client. So at a minimum, naturalized citizens are eligible for WorkBC employment services as general clients. But as I mentioned earlier, individuals who have been paying into employment insurance for at least 5 out of the last 10 years would now be considered EI clients in WorkBC, which really opens up their eligibility for additional services and supports. So naturalized citizens who have been living and working in Canada for some time may fit into this category. Refugee claimants who have been approved by the Immigration and Refugee Board and have documentation to prove that are also eligible for WorkBC as general clients. Some refugee claimants may apply for income assistance when they arrive in Canada, so those individuals may also be eligible for additional services and supports as income assistance clients. So before I wrap up my section on WorkBC, I'd just like to take a moment to look at the other 2 contracts under WorkBC. So in the new iteration of the program in 2019, apprentice services and assistive technology services have been separated into discrete contracts with specialized service providers, distinct from WorkBC employment services. So WorkBC Assistive Technology Services is delivered by Neil Squire Society and delivers employment-related disability supports for people with disabilities. However, if a client is already participating in WorkBC employment services and they're in case management and they require some type of assistive technology, the situation doesn't necessarily warrant a referral to the ATS service provider. The ES service provider can provide those disability supports if that's less cumbersome for the client. One exception is when a client requires communication or hearing devices. Only Neil Squire can provide those. We rely on their expertise to provide those to clients. And finally, WorkBC Apprentice Services is delivered by Douglas College, and that is the provision of financial supports to individuals in apprenticeship training. We're going to move on to the next section, which we have here. Oh, we have our next poll. So we would like to know if you know where your closest WorkBC center is, and if you connect with them regularly, or maybe you know where it is, but you don't have a contact, or if you're not quite sure. Okay, great. So I'm really happy to see that more than half of you connect with WorkBC regularly. And you know, we have launched the new program in April, so it's not surprising that a little over a third know where it is but don't yet have a contact, but that's definitely something that we could look at in the future. And if you don't know where your closest WorkBC center is, feel free to check out workbc.ca, type in your postal code, and away you go. Okay, and thanks for responding to our poll, and over to you, Lori.
Great, thank you, Christy, for your insights on the WorkBC program. Just to clarify who's speaking again, it's back to me, Lori Cameron, AMSA Provincial Integration Program Manager. As I mentioned earlier, I work in sector support projects for the BC Settlement and Integration Services Program. Christy's presentation leads right into the next section of our webinar. I'd like to introduce a top-line view of the e-learning module on the WorkBC program. First, though, I'm going to take a moment to clarify the difference between a webinar and an e-learning module, since the two may be confused with one another, and they're not the same. A webinar, like the one today, is a synchronous activity. It happens in real time. It's a form of online learning that takes place at a set time, and all participants join at the same time. Learning is at a set pace. There's some interactivity through the polls and the Q&A session. An e-learning module is a different form of online learning that is asynchronous. This means that there's no set time for the learning to take place. It's essentially an online workshop. You have the freedom to learn at a convenient time and at your own pace. You learn quickly and easily from your own location. It's interactive through clicking, indicating responses, and it has activities like quizzes, visuals, and sometimes videos. E-learning modules are available ongoing. To access them, simply find the registration link on the AMSA website to start the process. There's no charge to take the BCSIS e-learning modules. The WorkBC e-learning module is the 5th BCSIS training module that AMSA has developed with the support of the Ministry of Jobs, Trade and Technology. So why are the training modules important? Well, the BCSIS e-learning module series provides capacity building as well as process training on topics that are relevant to BCSIS service providers. BCSIS supports the social and economic integration of newcomers and helps them achieve the best possible settlement outcomes. This includes services in settlement, immigration and integration, labor market and employment, and language training. Employment services training is important for BCSIS staff who support diverse clients from a range of immigration status groups. Each has their own unique barriers and challenges to employment, and the WorkBC program is a valuable resource. We've learned from Christy how the WorkBC program provides employment and labor market services and supports to individuals, employers, and communities in BC. The program was designed to achieve key outcomes. First, clients will be more independent through sustainable employment achieved through timely, individualized services that are aligned with the labor market. Clients are empowered to achieve their social and economic potential. Secondly, the program contributes to an inclusive and progressive economy by helping employers and communities develop a strong workforce. Partnerships with employers, community, and other organizations are leveraged, and services are coordinated to meet the needs of individuals, employers, and communities. WorkBC and BCSIS both put people first, and there are parallels in these intended outcomes. BCSIS activities and supports help clients achieve positive outcomes over time. In the short term, this includes better access to services and resources, including WorkBC supports and other labor market programs. This will lead to improved ability to enter or stay in the workforce, plus a sense of community connectedness and belonging. Even the self-service area at WorkBC centers provides information, knowledge, a destination, and a sense of belonging for newcomers. Long-term outcomes are improved prospects for long-term economic prosperity, reduced reliance on social services, and full participation in BC society. Newcomers are supported to stay in BC permanently and contribute to economic growth. To achieve these outcomes, settlement workers evaluate the individual needs of clients and refer them, as appropriate, to WorkBC centers. They have referral protocols and coordinate services with WorkBC staff to ensure that clients access the WorkBC services and supports that they are eligible for. It's essential to understand eligibility based on immigration status, and Christy spoke a fair bit about that. There's more details in the e-learning module. Eligibility and referral situations are covered thoroughly in the e-learning module. We encourage you to watch for a future e-learning module that provides information to assist in service coordination and referrals. The content of the e-learning module will support the intended BCSIS service outcomes. There are 9 sections which will take the learner about 90 minutes to complete, but the module is self-paced and there's no time restrictions. The e-learning module will look different than the presentation you see today. It includes interactive elements like navigation menus, voice narration, imagery, video links, and of course the reference links, questions for reflection, and exercises to test comprehension. The first section provides the learner with an introduction and orientation to become familiar with the module structure and the training overview. The second section touches on BC economic and employment growth and the need for employment services. Section 3 provides background on WorkBC employment services with a bit of history and the evolution of the program. Section 4 explains the new WorkBC employment services model and highlights of recent changes. Sections 5 through 7 discuss in detail WorkBC services, eligibility factors, and integrated services and referrals. This includes client inclusion groups, services for immigrants, and services for immigrants who have temporary residence status. WorkBC self-services are particularly important to BCSIS clients with temporary immigration status. The e-learning module introduces an in-depth description of self-serve services and even has a video showing a resource center and the services that are available there. And we acknowledge the support of Mosaic, who provided the filming location and very helpful information and input for the video. Section 8 provides an introduction to features and content of WorkBC.ca, which is a valuable resource for frontline staff and for your clients. Throughout the workshop, there are questions for discussion and reflection, and opportunities for input. If you're taking the workshop as a group, for example at a team meeting, you can discuss the questions as a group. The training module includes a final quiz, which is designed to have the student think about what they've learned in the section and input responses. Each quiz tests knowledge with questions in formats like multiple choice or true, false. At the end, there's a course evaluation. Then, after every section is completed with a successful grade on the quizzes, the student will be awarded a certificate of completion. Settlement and employment services staff often track their professional development credits, so this is beneficial. As part of the module, you can review and download a resource page with helpful links to additional sources for in-depth learning, including a complete list of WorkBC service centers. The module will be posted on AMSA's Learning Management System at the end of September, as soon as technical production is complete. We will email all webinar participants a link for registration as soon as final production is completed, and a reminder that there's no cost or fee to take the e-learning module. I'd also like to remind you that the WorkBC e-learning module we've been discussing today is part of a series of online training workshops. The workshops support BCSIS and other frontline workers in knowledgeable service delivery. The topics available now on AMSA's system are refugee mental health, BC employment standards and workplace safety, immigration pathways to permanent residence for temporary residents, and diversity and inclusion training. The WorkBC Employment Services training module will be completed in about 5 weeks, and as I mentioned, we'll send you the link as soon as it's ready. So we have one last poll question for you. Please click on all of the AMSA BCSIS e-learning modules that you plan to take, and the list of all 5 of them are indicated on the screen. So please go ahead and start clicking on the ones that you are interested in taking. And it looks like we're almost there with the clicks completed. So it's interesting. We've got a fairly equal distribution of interest levels in all of the e-learning modules. And we're particularly high in the WorkBC Employment Services and the BC Employment Standards and Workplace Safety. So thank you, everybody, for giving us your feedback there. So the next steps for taking the online training workshop are that it'll be ready, as I mentioned, and we will provide the link for you to register for that workshop. And please encourage your staff, colleagues, and of course yourself to register and take the e-learning module. Professional development encourages self-care and supports staff in learning, growing, and gaining new perspectives. So I'd like to thank our guest speaker and all of our participants today. We appreciate your feedback in the polls and through your questions. And we must thank you also for the work that you do. We gratefully acknowledge the financial support of the province of British Columbia through the Ministry of Jobs, Trade and Technology for supporting the module series and today's webinar. We invite you to visit amsa.org for other helpful tools and resources. Thank you everyone for joining us today, and goodbye.